Welcome to the Fantasy Throwdown Podcast. The Fantasy Throwdown Podcast. Bringing you the latest from the world of daily fantasy sports and gambling, so you can stop Googling how to join a squid game to cover all those parlays you thought were such a sure thing. Now, sit back and listen to one of the sharpest minds in the game. Here's your host, Dwayne Callender.
Okay, guys, this is going to be a quick one, but Stanley Cup final between Colorado hosting the two-time defending Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning. You know, the Avs are favored. They've been the golden mark of season-long bets by bettors. The Avs were the favorite to take the cup this year. Tampa was right behind them. And honestly, I just look at this matchup, and I know Vegas is, they put the Avs as the favorite, and I vehemently disagree with the line. Tampa opened up as a plus 170 dog. Colorado was a minus 150 favorite. Minus 160. It was a minus one. So depending on the market, again, this is where you got anywhere from minus 160 to minus 180 on the Avs. Tampa was pretty much minus 170. In the couple of days we've had off since the Rangers were eliminated by Tampa, the Avs have been resting, obviously, since they swept an overmatched Oilers squad, which I told folks was not going to be a close series. This is where I think you get way too much remembrance of what just transpired. People are looking at the Avs as a juggernaut, and I'm just want to be honest with folks here. The Avs have a great offense. They are not a very sound defensive club. I think Tampa has way more avenues of punishing the Avs and their defense. Vasilevsky can cover up a lot of areas where the Avs are used to scoring. I think the Avs are about to face the hardest team they've played this postseason in the final. I don't think the Avs are the hardest team that Tampa has faced. I think Toronto was a tougher out than this Avs squad. I think Toronto had just as much talent as the Avs do. And I told you from the outset, there's no way I was picking Toronto over Tampa. I understood why people would want to say that Toronto has a good shot on knocking off Tampa. But Toronto, as talented as they were, they still couldn't figure out some of the little details, and that's what allowed Tampa to get through that series. But Toronto played a great series, and they still lost. I think Toronto is better than the Avs. So I'll be perfectly honest. This is going right back to what I talked about. The market is just not respecting how good Tampa is. And I think people are, again, underestimating how good the Rangers played this year. I think people look at the Tampa struggling against the Rangers, with the Rangers taking the first two and then Tampa taking the next four. They look at it as Tampa was struggling and not playing well, and then eventually got in gear. No, the Rangers were playing Tampa hard throughout. Tampa just managed to figure out ways of using their depth to beat the Rangers, who are lacking in face-off centermen, and the fact that the Rangers didn't have much in the way of secondary scoring 5-on-5 outside of what they were getting production-wise from the kid line and their top six. Even strength, the Rangers were not great in the playoffs from a number of errors, and there are reasons I can go into that fans don't necessarily want to hear. But we'll talk about that another time in terms of season outlook for some of these playoff teams. But in terms of the final, I just think that this line, it's come down from plus 170 to 150. But realistically, I think Tampa wins this series, and I don't think it's necessarily that it's going 7. I think Tampa can win this series in 6 games or less. So their series spread odds, you could still get Tampa minus 1.5 spread. So you're banking on them winning a 4-2 series or even earlier, and you can get them at plus 270. I'm just saying there are ways of making money off of Tampa. I don't see this Avs team winning any series against Tampa Bay that doesn't go 7, because Vasilevsky is going to steal some games from Colorado that Colorado would think that they could win, and they haven't had to deal with that this postseason. The closest they got was the fact that Jordan Binnington got knocked out by Nazem Kadri, and Vasilevsky is light years beyond Jordan Binnington. Like, the Avs have not gone up against a team with a good goaltender this entire postseason because Binnington got hurt in the Blue Series, and that series ended sooner than it should have because of the Binnington injury. All no disrespect to Ville Husso, but he ain't playoff ready. Like, Binnington was playoff tested. The Avs have not gone up against a true playoff caliber goalie this entire postseason. And now they're going up against the guy I think is the number 1 goalie in the league. It is what it is. So Tampa has already been through the ringer with play. They had to beat Shesterkin, who's standing on his head for the Rangers. They had to go through a Toronto squad that was good. They had to go through Florida, whom people had pegged as the best team in hockey because of how good they were in the regular season. They swept Florida. They took Florida completely out of their game. They are not going to be mystified by this Colorado Avalanche squad. So I'm just saying that this was being short and sweet. I have good money on Tampa. I think this series is shorter than people expect. So I would be leaning heavily on Tampa throughout this series. So for DFS purposes, my builds are going to be pretty much straight of the line, building out 5-1 Tampa builds with Vasilevsky somewhere in the mix, and then you get your choice of Stamkos, Hedman, and Braden Point is supposed to be back for a game 1 tonight, so we will see how he looks. But Point being back is a huge edge because, again, his presence has been missed throughout this playoff season with when he went down, because he's one of the top, like, he's literally the top 10 center in the NHL. You don't know necessarily that much about it because Stamkos and Kucherov always get the headlines, but Point is right there in terms of being an elite forward. I just look at this and say, Tampa's better. I think they are flat out better. The Avs' advantage is the fact that their defensemen are very good offensive defensemen. You got Cale Makar and Devin Taves. But Tampa has been going up against offensive defensemen quite often this year. I don't think they're going to get anything that surprises them speed-wise. The Rangers were one of the fastest teams in the league. Florida was one of the fastest teams in the league. Didn't matter. Just in terms of what you get from some of these teams, I do think that folks do not take into account the fact that Tampa's ability to switch gears, they can play offensive, but then they can drop the hammer on you and play defense and lock you down, make it difficult to traverse the ice and kind of slow you up in the neutral zone. They can slow down Colorado, and Colorado has not faced that this postseason. They're going to get a different look than I think they've gotten the entire postseason. Even St. Louis wasn't able to do it just because athletically they couldn't necessarily keep up with Colorado. They were able to do it for a couple of stretches, but they weren't able to do it for entire periods. Tampa can do that to Colorado, in my opinion. So, as I said, you hope for a good final, but I don't think this finals is nearly as close as people think, and I'm on the complete opposite side of what the odds makers have put this series at. I just think that it's a mistake that Tampa was put as the dog here, but hey, it is what it is. Like, people are on the Colorado side. I just don't think Colorado has been tested nearly enough as people think they have been this postseason, and I think Tampa is there to expose some of their flaws, especially on the goalkeeping front, because I still don't believe Darcy Kemper is the number 1 goaltender, and truth be told, he's probably one of the weakest goaltenders. I'd say he's probably the weakest goaltender. Like, now I go back through everything between Jack Campbell Bobrovsky, whom I've never sold on in the playoffs, but I still would take Bobrovsky over Kemper. And Shesterkin, I believe, is the second best goaltender in the league behind Vasilevsky. This is the weakest goaltender I believe that they faced this postseason. I'm sorry. I can't be any clearer about where I am on this series for the NHL. So it'll take the Avs to prove me wrong, but I just think Tampa's flat out better. I think it's flat out better. I don't think this series is nearly as close as people are going to make it out to be, but we shall see how the games go. But that's all for now. I'm going to get out of here because we're getting close to puck drop. So hopefully you guys got your preview of the Stanley Cup Final. I expect Tampa to win this in 6, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was in fewer games. It would not shock me if Tampa won this in 5. And I know people would say it's a complete shock if this was a sweep. It wouldn't be to me. I don't think Colorado is necessarily prepared for Tampa. I could be wrong, but I just don't think they've necessarily been tested as much as they probably needed to be. And that's because, some of the matchups they had were very favorable to them, especially once St. Louis started racking up injuries. That was the toughest series they had. And, the Blues were banged up. But, it is what it is. You can't choose who you get to play. So we'll see how good the Avs truly are. But I think this is a major ramp up in competition. And it's on the biggest stage of them all. So we shall see. Anyway, that's all I got for the show. Enjoy the games and have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Throwdown Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all other major outlets.